So just as a quick preview for our folks watching at home, we're going to try the horizontal format so it feels a little nicer, like we're in conversation with each other. So if you're watching on a device at home, I would recommend turning it to the horizontal format. And I've paused the comments so they're not going to take up our screen real estate. But we may share some photos of pictures of Carrie's current project on the half of the phone that Simone and I are on. So, so for any of you who are watching along, I'm Rachel Ropeik. I'm the learning director here at the Aspen Art Museum, and I am joined by...
I'm Simone Krug. I am the assistant curator here at the Aspen Art Museum, and we are so excited and honored and thrilled to have Carrie Weems joining us this afternoon in Aspen, and this evening on the East Coast. Carrie is in Syracuse, and let's get started.
Yeah, so we're going to chat.
So we want to focus on the series Resist COVID, Take 6. In this new series, Carrie, you draw awareness to the ways in which racial inequalities have manifested in the COVID-19 pandemic, with people of color at disproportionately high risk of contracting the virus. And the project Resist COVID, Take 6 seeks to raise public awareness through flyers, posters, billboards. Here we have these newspapers that we'll show in a moment again, that are then distributed at churches, community centers, and public sites all over cities. And I wanted to start by asking, how did you conceive of this initiative? I know it started from a conversation you were having with a friend, but how did it evolve into this much, much larger project?
Through happenstance. You know, I mean, you know, one of the things that's always interesting to me is that how things happen because of relationships, because you're in dialogue and conversation, because you're trying to figure something out. And so, you know, a few months ago, just at the beginning of the lockdown, when we were just sort of entering the lockdown, I was on a conversation with, you know, one of my closest friends, Pierre Loving, who really is the person who initially came up with the project. We were, you know, sort of lamenting the fact that we knew that COVID-19 would be, that people of color would be disproportionately impacted by COVID-19 because they would primarily be the frontline workers, right? They would be the frontline workers, and there was also a very good possibility that they would also have underlying health conditions. And so we were just sort of talking about that, just talking it through on a Friday evening. And the next morning, she, you know, that night, she hung up the phone and she wrote me, you know, a 3-page proposal and said, this is, I think, Carrie, what we really should be thinking about and what we should do. Pierre is a lawyer, and so great with language and ideas, and I'm a visual artist. And so the moment I received the proposal, I thought, okay, well, we have to do this, right? We have to do this. It's important to do. And I'm going to use everything that I know how to do, all of my skill, all of my, you know, sort of my sense of my sense of, you know, graphic language, as well as text and, you know, language, to figure out very quickly, because we knew that time was of the essence, how to figure out very quickly how to build an artist-driven public awareness campaign that would be targeted for the most part to the most impacted. They would have general residents on the one hand, because we're all impacted by COVID-19. Every one of us is impacted by it. But we also really wanted to have a conversation with those people that were really being seriously impacted because they were frontline workers. And so those sort of basic edicts like, you know, wash your hands, wear your mask, maintain some sort of level of physical distance at all times, those basic things, and that COVID-19 is not a hoax. It's not a hoax, that you've got to be, you know, that this is deadly serious, it's deadly real, and we've got to protect ourselves at all costs. That I want to see you all on the other side of midnight.
And so I just want to show, we do have digital images that I can put up.
Oh,
but
great.
Just also printed out some to see these kind of in the wild, as it were, right? So that these are kind of, they're sandwich boards on sidewalks and, posters that are being put up on the sides of buildings. And I was a little bit curious because I know you have worked in a lot of different media over the course of your career. How did you sort of figure out what channels or what media you wanted to use for this campaign with that public communication element in mind?
Well, maybe first of all, I've always been like really interested in advertising, in advertisement.
Okay.
The sort of forms of it. And then, but I'm never interested in really selling a consumer product. I'm not really interested in selling handbags or perfume or a dishwasher, right? So, but I've always been really intrigued by these ideas. And of course, there's a huge science around advertising. So I've been interested in that for a long time. And then about 10 years ago, just about 10 years ago, here in Syracuse, there was a lot of community violence that was taking place, and so I developed actually my first public art campaign about 10 years ago, and it was focused again on community violence and how to address the community around those issues. So it was sort of like, okay, so what are the forms, what are the mediums, what are the ways that I can enter a household? In a place like Syracuse, every city is different. Every city, every state is different. In Syracuse, unfortunately, the average mean income is lower than the state of Mississippi. One of the poorest states in the nation, right? The inner city of Syracuse is impacted even worse. It's pretty astounding to be in New York, 2 hours from Albany, 4 hours from New York City, right? And so I started this project, right? And I thought, okay, we can use posters, we can use billboards, we can use lawn signs, we can use flyers that have information on the backs of them, information that is particularly needed and necessary for the community. So for instance, maybe it has something to do with unemployment or, domestic violence or general social services or healthcare centers, food pantries. Where is the sort of critical information that you need to know, and putting that then on the back of a flyer. And so then I figured out that I could actually use the newspaper and newspaper circulars to go to every single home, and then making a decision that we could divide it like everything else by zip code, right? And so by zip code, I could go then I could have newspaper inserts going to very specific zip codes amongst the most impacted and those people that I was really interested in having a dialogue with. And so I've used that sort of strategy before. And so coming then back to this idea of COVID-19, it's impacting the same community all over again, which of course has to do with the systemic nature of inequity, inequality, right? So there's more violence in that community. And of course, the pandemic is simply another form of violence that's been unleashed on all of us, but that's impacting this community in a very extraordinary and devastating way.
So can I put up maybe some of the pictures of the
Absolutely, I'd love to see them.
Let me pull them up. So the
door handle.
Yeah, the door signs. And so when you were thinking about where you wanted these to go, you were thinking about, so a door sign, it makes me think of like a hotel or, a place where you would have people kind of walking by that door on a regular basis. or
walking up to a door.
right. Right. What are you aware of as you decide?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. This image actually was made with my iPhone with a group of young poets that I was working with during the pandemic. The Peace Brotherhood and Sister Soul is the name of this organization in Harlem. A great group of people, and I've worked with them also to develop some of the poets to develop our PSA as well. And so I made this image of people in mass because I knew that people needed to be masked up, and and that throughout our community, throughout the community, for a while, because there was unfortunately by the president himself that COVID-19 was a hoax, that it wasn't real, and that whatever it was going to disappear in short order. I needed to make something that really addressed that issue, that question, that COVID-19 is not a hoax, that it's deadly real, and that if you're coming to my home, then you need to be aware that I take it seriously, and I want you to take it seriously.
I know. We're both kind of applauding.
I'm curious in that sense, like what the public's reaction has been to these, door handles, to these signs, to these newspaper advertisements.
Yeah, I can show.
Have you had
I want to show the lawn
any sort of like negative reactions? I'm curious about how the public has reacted to these works.
Well, something, that's an interesting question. I don't really know.
Interesting.
Okay. I don't really know because it's a difficult time to know just about anything, right? I'm not out there doing like, a survey on how it's being perceived or received for that matter. But I do know something that's very interesting, and thanks for putting these signs up, Rachel. I personally, with my own hands and my own time, my own body, put up these signs throughout my neighborhood about 3.5 weeks ago. And 3.5 weeks later, they're all up.
I feel like that's some public feedback for you right there.
This is really a very interesting question because it's in a place like Syracuse where things are very stressed, where it's a very poor community, unfortunately. We're trying, but nonetheless, that's our reality. One of the things that I realized as I drove through every day was that there's absolutely no visual language. There was no visual language about anything. There are no billboard sites. There are no, right? There's nothing of intrigue. There's nothing of beauty. There's nothing about you anywhere, right? This community has basically been deserted by the powers that be in a large way. So advertisers are not here. Advertisements are not here. Large billboards are not here, which is one of the reasons that I actually came up with lawn signs. That it would be a way of activating the neighborhood in a very particular kind of way, and that it would serve as a visual reference, and that you would actually be reflected in the thing that was being used, right? And so that's been actually really important, and I think that one of the reasons that the signs are still up for this long is because people recognize the importance, and that it also engages the look of the people. It looks like the people that are in the community, and it looks like the young people who are more or less the people that are walking up and down the streets, right? Older people are driving, but young people are walking.
I'm trying to see if I can pull up some of these other pictures to highlight this. Yeah, I mean, I also think there's something about lawn signs to me too that is, like you said, it's sort of meeting people where they're at. That so many times you see lawn signs and it's for a local election or it's a town council kind of election, right? I mean, yes, larger political events and things we'll use. But I feel like often you drive through a town and you see, you know, it's vote yes on Proposition 4 because that's the important issue in that town.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. No, it was, I think it was really a good thing to do. And for us, because we have so few billboards throughout the city, and particularly throughout this particular stretch of the neighborhood or these zip codes, it's the only way really to get visual material out into the world. So I came up with this idea. But another thing that we did that I thought was also really important was using advertising circulars, using, again, leaflets and flyers, door handles and bags that could go into the advertising circular that would be delivered into the home, right? So that there, so at the beginning of the pandemic, when in New York, Como has done an extraordinary job when everything was locked down, when we were, completely asked to stay home, do not go out, right? It was like, okay, well, but the newspaper is being delivered to the home every day or 3 times a week or on Sunday, right? And the advertising circular is delivered once a week. So using that as a way of getting material into the home, right? So that you didn't have to go out to consume it, it would be brought to you, was a really important part, I think, of the thinking and of the strategy. And so I'm hoping that it's working. I did a project again, a few years ago on violence. And on the back side of our flyer, it says something like, create a circle of concern and post this poster and flyer in your window so that people can see it. I did it 10 years ago. I can still walk through my neighborhood and there are still flyers up in certain windows 10 years later.
Yeah.
The message resonates.
Yeah. Well, and that when you are giving people that option to bring something into their home and decide what they want their home space to feel like or what messages they want to be coming out of their home space, you're sort of giving them that power. If they saw that and they thought, okay, I don't want to put that in my window, that would be their choice too. But the fact that they did and that they're still up is telling.
Oh, I was very impressed. Somebody came to the community and did a story about a year ago, and they photographed the front of somebody's house, and sure enough, there was, one of the posters of creating a safe zone, creating a safe zone. But I think, at the end of the day, really, I think of this work. I mean, I did not plan to do this work. I did not plan to be so deeply involved in this. 4 months later, I thought for sure I was going to design these images for my friend who made the proposal. I turn it all over to her and run with it. I've got a whole bunch of other things to do. But at the end of the day, of course, it is deep. It's complex. The pandemic is wide, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. And so getting this material out, having it constantly engaged and reminding, it's just a reminder of every day, just like I have to think of it every day. Every day when I leave my house, I have to remember to take my mask. I have to remember to wash my hands thoroughly when I come into the house. I have to remember to maintain social distance. I went to see my mother-in-law for the first time today in 4 months, right? I had to see her. She's just come home from the hospital. I couldn't kiss her. I couldn't hug her. I couldn't be close to her, but I could maintain, 6 feet of distance, say hello, talk to her for a while, and then come home. That's really sort of the project, and it's a labor of love. And by the way, I'll tell you, this photograph, Life is Beautiful, is an image of my mother that I made 30 years ago.
I was going to say, you've also kind of repurposed some of your own photographs or brought your own kind of photographic history into this in a way that I think is like further reinforces the fact that it's that there's an artistic value to this too and an aesthetic value to this too, as well as the value of the messages.
I hope so.
I was just going to put up the other one because I think part of what I appreciate about this is that you're doing it with an informative tone, but also with a tone of hope.
Absolutely.
And so this one, I also love this one, which if it's blocking for anyone watching, if you can't totally see because our little inset video is blocking it, it says, "Don't worry, we'll hold hands again."
Is that at the Museum of Modern Art Garden?
It is. It is. It is. You know, I mean, I think, part of, this work. I did this project at MoMA, maybe in 2016. I was asked to do a project on MoMA's garden. And the way that I approached the project was by, I love the archives. And so I went into the archives and I was digging around and looking at past photographs. And at a certain moment, I realized in that investigation that, there had been very few people of color that had been, ever a part of these sort of wonderful garden parties that had happened at MoMA in the 60s and 70s. Very few. So I decided that I would restage a whole group of activities and parties that had happened at MoMA during that time, but that I would invite a sort of wonderful and diverse group of people to join me. I love people. I don't care about race. I don't really care about ethnicity in that sort of way. I want my life to be dynamic and full and rich, and it can't be that with just one group of people. It is that, and I am expanded and enriched because I have this sort of great group of artist friends from every conceivable walk of life that I can pick up the phone and say, "Hey, I'm doing something over at MoMA. I want y'all to come and be a part of this." And so I built these images, right, around these ideas of things that had happened there. And I decided to repurpose several of them, two of them in particular, for this project. This one, "Don't Worry, We'll Hold Hands Again." And the other, which is "My Point Is," right? All lives matter, of course, but my point is people of color are being most impacted by COVID-19.
This one?
Exactly, right? A really wonderful photograph of, of having people in dialogue with one another, I thought would be really crucial. So, you again sort of reorchestrating a party that had happened many years ago, but bringing into the mix a group of dynamic artists, writers, thinkers, poets, to have, and they were really having a discussion. This is not simply a staged moment, right, for the photograph. They were really engaged in very deep discussion about what institutions should be, what museums should be, how they should be or not be welcoming, what they were going to carry in the future. So it was really kind of wonderful. In this great photograph, there's Carl Hancock Rux, who's in front of us, Helga Davis, a great performance artist who worked for many, many years with Robert Wilson, and the extraordinary artist Basil Twist, who I love, this great, puppeteer, and in the foreground is Francesca Harper, also a really wonderful choreographer. So these are really sort of really wonderful contemporary artists who are also friends who were willing to sort of engage with me. But bringing that work forward, using that work, I mean, no work is an old work. Every work can be reimagined, re-understood, but it really gets to the heart of actually what we were doing there, 6 years ago. Is purposeful now to what we're doing now, right? Of having this conversation that I know that there are people out there who dismiss the idea or who think that it's almost impossible that it might be true that people of color have been most impacted by COVID-19.
Well, it's interesting too that you mentioned that when you had originally set that project up in the Garden of MoMA, you were also kind of commenting on how historically these parties at MoMA had been predominantly white spaces and that not many people of color were showing up in these archival photographs. And it's interesting too to think about here, you're kind of putting this photograph with a new, 2020 moment topic of hotly debated conversation, but that it's all of these kind of different levels of social commentary keep kind of resonating and layering on top of each other.
I think that that's true. I mean, I think that that's one of the things that sort of interests me about work, and that it can operate on a number of different levels. That even though it's, this project is about, sort of centered on COVID-19, it's also really centered on ideas that have larger implications about the importance of inequity, and the necessity for all of us to engage that question if we are to move ahead. And also, it's really a beautiful photograph. you
Oh,
know, it kind of does everything it needs to do, which
this
is
one,
really good.
I mean, I feel like this gets at exactly all of those layers. I think the the directness and the multifaceted aspect of this project is something that I think is really interesting. There's some text that's very direct, and then it also invites you to kind of keep looking and think about the image and the meanings behind the images or the associations with the images and what else might be there.
Great.
I know I keep going to the ones with image and text. You also have some that are just text, if you want to talk about them. I work in the visual art world, so I keep being drawn to the ones that are the combination. But
I think that I think that text is also image. Text is image. Text is symbol. It's one of the most sophisticated, one of the most magical of all images, right? That can be read and that can also be imagined in sort of extraordinary ways. And I think that there's always I'm always sort of thinking about the balance sort of between those two things. Um, what is, sort of poetic text? What is, sort of instructional text? This is sort of very instructional, but uh, it took me, in fact, this particular design is a design that I've changed, right? It's a design that I've changed because the letters needed to read differently on the page. The letters as a surface, the letters as an image needed to read differently on the page. And so that's been also a part of the process of, really thinking about, how the word sits on a page, what's in the background, whether it's simply a color, as in the case that you're showing, but how to present that text, so that it functions both as something of a thing of beauty, but also as a thing of instruction. So I'm pretty intrigued with language, even though I consider myself to be a really awful writer. I'm just terrible at it. But nonetheless, I'm always trying to really think about language and to use it in a way that doesn't alienate. And I suppose finally, I'll say that. I'm constantly asking myself questions about what works, what doesn't work, why it doesn't work, why is it successful, why does it fail? What is the thing that I want to hear coming from myself, and what do I want to deliver to you? Right? What allows us to have conversation? What allows us to be open? And then what forces us to be closed down, right? So there's a way in which we can use language that is didactic, that simply closes us. We're not interested. We don't want to hear it. We've heard it before, right? But can you imbue in the language something that poses the question that I have, and I assume that because I'm not an alien, that you'll have to, right? And that through that, then there's a way in which we might be able to come closer together in order to understand something more profoundly about one another.
yeah, I put this one up because I think this is another one like that kind of gets at that idea of what you were saying about kind of bringing people together or inviting people to consider the situation that we're in new ways. That I think there's been a lot of talk, especially early in the pandemic when people were really in more lockdown, stay at home, at all costs mode. that talk about essential workers or, who is out there who still is being asked to work. And I think that it would be one thing, like looking at this image of yours, it would be one thing to say, thank the workers of the world, or, just focusing on the kind of to the front line workers, but the fact that you've then called out some specific roles of people who are continuing to work kind of makes it.
Yeah. I was just in the Hamptons. I went there for vacation for a few days. The Hamptons is a place of, it is an extraordinary concentration of wealth.
Similar to Aspen.
We're in Aspen, Colorado. It is.
So you know. I mean, it's pretty intense, right? Well, like all those people that couldn't go to Aspen are in the Hamptons.
Of escape, yeah.
But an extraordinary concentration of wealth, and where privilege is worn on the sleeve, literally. The way in which people treat one another, the way in which they mistreat one another, the sort of condescension, the sort of air of, if anybody's moving, it's got to be you, because it can't be me. It's just really revolting in a lot of ways. It's really repulsive. I feel sorry for them. But what I realized while I was there was that the vast majority of the people that were holding it down, the vast majority of the people who were making sure that you got your groceries and you got your delivery, you got your house painted, you got your lawn mowed, you got your clothes washed, you got your house cleaned, all of them, for the most part, were Latino. They were Spanish-speaking people, a lot of them who speak bilingually, some of them who only speak Spanish, but they are holding it down.
Our ad in today's Aspen newspaper is in Spanish, actually.
Yeah, let me see if I. That was the.
I can't see it. Bring it closer, closer.
Here, it's this one.
Yeah.
It may show up flipped for you on the video.
Oh, that's right. A little bit of distance goes a long way.
Yeah.
A little bit of distance goes a long way. Just so wonderful. Another photograph that I made many years ago with a group of students in the Silicon Valley whose families, mothers and fathers, were farm workers there, right? And so, it's the changing same, right? These sort of issues have been there for many, many, many years. Who's farming for you? Who's working for you? Who's really delivering your essential services? These have been consistent over years. This didn't happen simply because of COVID-19 and this pandemic. The pandemic has simply really broken open the chasm.
Yeah.
And so now we have to look at this as George Floyd's death. Right? We can now look at this with all of the brutal clarity that it brings. And that we have a choice that we're either going to move forward or we're going to maintain traditional ideas that cripple us all, or we can do something about it. And so I'm in this neighborhood and I understand that, all of these amazing men and women who are making this shit happen for us, and they are all, Latinos, all the people that Trump was attempting to keep out of the country for all kinds of, bizarre and strange and disappointing reasons and, illogical reasons. That nationalism can only take you so far, that white supremacy can only take you so far. And I realize that there's an extraordinary amount of power in the hands of workers, and that a part of what they really need to do is to exert what that means. The unfortunate thing is that unions have been busted, unions have been destroyed and decimated in the country, and it makes it much more difficult for people to organize. But I thought that if these workers in the Hamptons decided for just 1 week to just slow it down or just not show up, we'd have a whole different kind of understanding about what essential work really means. I mean, it's really sort of extraordinary. So this has
And
been a great project to sort of work on and to explore many, many, many of these kinds of ideas in both subtle and not so subtle ways.
And I just want to show some of the other things that you have kind of used, these objects that have come into play as well, and kind of thinking about different ways that you can communicate some of these messages and kind of meeting people where they're at. I thought it was just really interesting that you also kind of went beyond, you know, you've explained some of the posters and the lawn signs and, you know, newspaper circulars, but also the idea of having it, you know, on a tote bag that someone is carrying, or a fan, or
Absolutely, absolutely. I have my, you know, I have my dump trunk bag that I carry with me everywhere right about now, you know, and which is great. And I'll send you one. And, you know, I mean, you know, we again, you know, sort of going back to these sort of ideas, you know, I'm going to say something to you very, very directly. Women are not often supported, and Black women are supported even less than the general population. And we know this, you know, we know this because it's been documented very thoroughly. And so, you know, I always have to think about like the economy of means, right? I think about the economy of means. How do I get, you know, my material out there in the most effective way, right? And how can I affect the most number of people in with the least amount of money, because I only have a little bit. I only have like a tiny, tiny, tiny bit. Right? And Aspen decides to send me like a fortune, right? You know, and so I thought, okay, I can do buttons. I can do buttons, and the buttons can be given out. Thousands of buttons can be given out throughout my community. Church fans can be given out. Church fans can be given out, and thousands of them have been given out. Grocery bags can be given out. And in fact, a whole series of things could go into my grocery bag: mask, buttons, door hangers. Masks were important because people don't always have $5 or $10 for a mask, right? And certainly those people that are struggling with unemployment, magnets, all of these items that are very, very, very inexpensive to produce, but I think beautifully designed, could be given out in any number of ways, but also they could all go into our shopping bag. And we did paper bags and we did recyclable bags, right? And all of those bags would then go to food pantries. Food pantries would then load the bags with food to be given away every week. And in those bags would be our buttons, our masks, our flyers, our magnets, our giveaways that serve as a constant reminder of how to protect oneself over the course of the pandemic.
These essential items, ultimately.
Yeah, essential items and just good items as reminders, you know, like, you know, a grocery bag can be an essential item, you know, but, you know, a mask is absolutely essential. But all the other material is simply about awareness, just building and maintaining awareness. Wash your hands, wear your mask, back up, maintain some social distance, and if you can, get tested.
Yeah.
Right? You know, if it's possible, stay home. And I know that it's really difficult to all of you out there. I know how difficult it is. I met today with a wonderful group of young students. There were 40 of them. I was so happy to be in a room filled with people. It's the first time I've been in a room filled with people in 6 months.
sounds so nice.
Right? Beautiful young kids. They're part of, like, you know, a program on, you know, leadership, that kind of thing. African American, Native American, Hispanic American for the most part. Wonderful young kids. You know, and I just sort of talked to them about how difficult it was, how hard it is for me. You know, every day I have to remember to wear my mask. Every day I have to remember to sanitize my hands. Every day I have to, right? That I'm uncomfortable with this thing on my face all day long. I'm uncomfortable standing here talking with it, right? So I know how you feel, but I know that it's something that we absolutely have to do if we're going to survive this thing. And it was really wonderful. And the thing that I know more than ever before is that the importance of the lack of social distance. That I need my friends, I need my family, I need my loved ones, I need a hug, I need a kiss. And if I'm feeling that way at 67 years old, I can only imagine what a 13, 14, 15-year-old kid is feeling right now when they're saying, maybe you won't go to school after all this year. So we're in a tough time, but it's extraordinary. And to do this project has been really wonderful. It's been a labor of love. It's allowed me to really focus, and it's allowed me to focus on my community and beyond. And fortunately, a number of cities have taken on the project. I'm happy to say, from New York, Philadelphia just launched their project. Savannah and Atlanta just launched their projects. Savannah has done theirs. Sarasota has done theirs. Nashville is doing theirs. Texas is doing theirs. Chicago is doing theirs. Dallas is doing theirs, where the numbers are the highest. And Chicago has just launched billboards. And so it's a project that started at my little desk, trying to figure out how to have a conversation with my community and with people that I care about, and with the society and what we need to be aware of and thinking about. And suddenly, 9 other states have taken on the project thus far, and I think that more are to be signing on in the future. So it's been a wonderful and enlightening, devastating time, but hopeful that there is something that we're paying attention to and that people find it important to engage.
And no wonder you have continued to feel this amount of investment in it beyond what you thought was going to be just sort of your initial idea that you would hand off. It sounds like,
no, take it and run, take it and run. She was like, no.
But I think even here, people around the museum or people that we're talking to around town have been kind of collecting the newspapers with each week's ad in them.
Oh, really? And so then how has that been going? How are people responding to the work on that level? As a sort of, as newspaper inserts, which is what you did, of the ads. What are you hearing?
Go ahead.
It's hard to gauge. You send something out into the world, and have we gotten feedback that you're aware of?
What I know is that I've been talking more to individual people who are almost like seeing it as a collectible. Like, what's the next week's going to be? Like, I want to see what the next week's message is, and kind of thinking of it as a series and like what the series of messages is conveying. I think one thing, and I will say, as somebody who moved to Aspen relatively recently, I have been so impressed by how many people read the newspaper here. Like, the physical newspaper here reaches people as kind of like the number one way of communicating.
I love the newspaper.
Yeah.
Hopefully it'll bring our newspaper back. I love the newspaper. I love like touching it and getting all the ink on my fingers. And so you have to send me copies of the newspaper. I have to see it. I miss it. I got to see what they feel like. So promise me. How many ads did we do? Just 2 or 4?
4, I think.
We're doing 4 total, and today I believe is the 3rd.
Yeah.
It's the one that my colleague Rachel is holding. And we have one final ad, I think, next week.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's great. Well, this is what I just got from Ai Weiwei. Artist Ai Weiwei.
There you go.
These are, so Ai Weiwei, amazing Chinese artist, sent me a set of masks recently. He's done, it's interesting, I'm always interested in what other artists are doing, because I'm very nosy and deeply curious, and because I curate projects too. And so Weiwei sent me a group of masks that he.
That's the one I've seen.
Have you seen them?
I feel like I've been seeing people on my social media feeds.
Oh, really? There are 21 of them in all.
Okay.
They're all available. So if your audience is interested in them, they should go look at them. But they're really kind of wonderful. And I receive them in this sort of really beautiful package. Like each of them sort of comes in this sort of really beautiful, sort of rice paper envelope. And the mask is inside. And, they're just kind of cool. So I was really happy to get them. And, oh, wait, no, I have to finish up. I have to say. So, there's also, so that you open this envelope, right? And inside the envelope is that envelope. And inside that envelope is the mask. And then there's this sort of really wonderful level of description that's a part of the whole thing. So it's a really beautiful set of ideas, right? I mean, how artists present information and material always fascinates me. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I think is really remarkable about the way in which artists specifically have responded to the moment is that they are not bureaucrats and they're not laden with bureaucracy. And so, it's been very difficult for, for instance, I was doing a project with Chicago, who they were some of the first. Mayor Lightfoot was one of the first people out of the gate saying, right, of all of the people that have been impacted by COVID-19, 82% of them, 82% of them, 82% of them in Chicago are people of color. 82% of them are Black and Latinos for the most part that have been impacted by COVID-19 in this city. In Atlanta, it was 72%. In someplace else, it was 68%. In someplace else, it was 47%. But the numbers were really sort of staggering. And even though the governments realized, I have to finish this idea.
Yeah. We're
Even
getting
though the governments, were aware of it, they weren't prepared, and they could talk about it. They weren't prepared to generate any material around it because of the bureaucracy that they're laden with. And so that's where I think artists, arts organizations, and cultural institutions are able to sort of be more nimble.